Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station. And or FM translator in a world where we could have all the information together in one place is what we do every Tuesday with what we like to call Truth Tuesdays. It's a rebranding. It's a rebranding. We're trying to rebrand it here to make it less negative because we don't want it to be. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets comes on every week to talk with us about three big issues that he thinks are important, and we probably should too. And so we're going to dive into it with Brad here in just a second. Also, in hour two, Chris Story comes in to salve our savage wounds from all the truth that we get dumped early in hour one. And he makes us leave with a positive note. And so that's what we do every day. And in the meanwhile, I just kind of throw some stuff in there in the mix to just kind of stir things up just to see what happens, because that's how I like to roll. And we'll do that this morning. Joining us, of course, is Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Hello, my friend. I'm struggling with this whole positivity thing. I just got to say right now, it's
Well, we've stuck with the rebranding for 3 shows now, so we're on a roll.
I think we're doing well. We're doing well. All right. So, Brad, we joke about it, but I mean, the truth is hard sometimes. And, sometimes people have a hard time wrapping their brains around it, but you got to do what you got to do. And we got to calls them like we sees them, I think is the old adage. So let's get cranking on it. This morning, we're going to revisit actually some things that we've talked about recently. Most importantly, and number one here, because I actually heard somebody after we had our conversation last week about it. And for the life of me, I cannot remember who it was, but we were talking with somebody and they started talking about Willow and Pika and how it was going to bring all this new revenue. And I was like, you realize that that's not actually going, but I mean, it's a real thing. So oil revenues part 2. We're going to come back to oil revenues here. Hit me with number 1 of the weekly top 3.
Well, last week we talked about Tim Bradner's column in the Frontiersman, where Tim tried to develop a relationship between production, increasing production, and implied that there was increasing revenues that followed it. And as I described, as we discussed on the show, that's not what's going on. There is the revenue forecast. The spring revenue forecast does predict substantial increase in production over the next 10 years, but it shows revenues declining slightly and sort of kicking up right at the end, basically a flat line of revenues from oil over that period. So I've dug further into this because I want people really to comprehend what's going on and why this is happening. Part of it is that we're tilting production to NPRA, and when you tilt production toward federal lands, state doesn't get any royalty, which is a significant part of state revenues. State doesn't get any royalty. Part of it is the production taxes is not working, I think, the way that the state intended, at least when it passed SB 21. As we go forward, it's not working the way the state intended. I think the state intended that revenues from production tax would follow production, but that's not what's going on. So I'm trying a different way. I've dug into the numbers deeper this past week and in preparing for the Friday landmine article that will be on this. And I've tried to use the numbers to show what's going on. I've gone all the way back to 2000 to develop the numbers, all the way through 2033 or 2024 on a current basis, and all the way up to 2033 on a projected basis to show what's going on. It's hard sometimes to look at revenues and really realize, disaggregate and understand how the numbers are being put together, because production volumes change over time periods, prices change over time periods. And so you really, while revenues are doing something, you really can't see just from the gross revenue number what's driving what. The way to do it is to break it down. The one constant you can use over time is to break it down by what the state's take is as a percent of price. And that will show you what the state's take is on a per barrel basis, and what the state's take then is as a percent of price. And that will show you what's going on with respect to revenues over time. So we're doing a chart, and we'll try to turn this into graph form by the time we get to the Friday column. But here's what the graph shows, and the real numbers. There's 2 sets of numbers I want people to focus on, but one set is right before that dark gray line. The for those on the radio. We've got a chart up on the screen for the Facebook and YouTube people, but I'll try to describe what it's doing. Above the dark line, what we're showing is total revenues from oil as a percent of price, as a percent of what the oil price is. And you can see that the state revenue as a percent of price in the pre-ACES era from 2000, we went back to 2000. I was trying to get 25 years of data. In the pre-ACES era, what's called the ELF era, for taxes, for production tax purposes, It's when we use we use gross revenues, a gross percentage, but we use the economic limit factor and economic limit factor to try to tailor that gross tax to fields. In the pre-ACES era, the state revenue as a percent of price was 22.7%. So for every dollar that producers received in terms of price per barrel, the state received 22.7% of that. And it's worth noting that 22.7% is made up of two numbers. The state receives a portion of the oil revenue that goes to UGF, goes to unrestricted general fund. But there's a portion of the revenue, another portion of the revenue goes to restricted funds, goes to restricted uses. For example, the Constitution requires that a certain amount of the revenue from royalty go into the permanent fund. It also requires that a portion of the revenue go into what's called the public school fund. Not much, but a portion of the royalty revenue go into the public school fund. And there's other revenues that go into the restricted category. From budget making purposes, most people usually focus on the UGF number. But from a producer's standpoint, they're focused on how much they're giving the state. They don't care if it goes to UGF or restricted. They're just focused on how much it goes to the state. So the total number, the total percent of the barrel, total percent of the price that went to the state, restricted plus unrestricted, that went to the state in the pre-ACES era, averaged out from 2000 to 2007, averaged out about 22.7%. That's how much of each dollar that the producer got went to the state, restricted and unrestricted. In the ACES era, 2008 to 2014, that number jumped from 22.7% to over 35%. The number was 36.9%. That's a huge jump on the gross. That means that more than a third of the gross price, not net, but more than a third of the gross price that producers were receiving for their barrel went to the state, combined unrestricted plus restricted, 36.9%. Huge jump. That was too much. That's what the legislature and the governor reacted to in 2013 in passing SB 21. That was too much. It was running there. It was redirecting investment away from Alaska. The tax burden on the revenue was way out of sync compared to comparables, and it was redirecting the revenue investment away from Alaska. So that's what addressing that overtake, if you will, was what SB 21 was intended to do. Then we look at the SB 21 era, 2015 to 2024. And that take, which pre-ACES was 22.7%, then jumped to 36.9% during the ACES era. The state share of the revenue as a percent of price dropped to 20.4%, has dropped to 20.4% in the SB 21 era. In that era, we've got it from 2015 to fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2024. And so you can see that it dropped. I mean, it achieved SB 21 achieves the objective of getting it back down to more reasonable levels, more competitive levels. But it dropped further than in the pre-ACES era. It dropped from the pre-ACES era was 22.7%. Now we've dropped down to 20.4% in the post-ACES era, in the SB 21 era. Now we go to the projection. The projection is for the projection that's in the latest revenue forecast is from 2025 forward to 2033. And we start looking at what the percent of revenue is. It's not only that percent of revenue is not only not holding constant with the pre-ACES era. It's not getting back to the 22.7% that we had pre-ACES. It's dropping from the SB 21 era. What's happening is SB 21, the way that SB 21 got set up is continuing to drive the state share of revenues down during the next decade, and it drops from 20.4%, which is what it is in the SB21 era, down to 18.8% in the projection period. So this is what's going on. Yes, volumes are going up, but the share of the state's getting per barrel is dropping, frankly, like a rock when you look at these numbers. And so the state's overall share, even though the state's share is on a higher number of barrels, the state share per barrel is dropping, and it's holding the overall revenue through the projection period constant. That's a problem. I don't think, if you ask people who were present at the creation of SB21, and I was one of them, I don't think that we would say that the intent was for the state's share to drop like this. I think people would say the intent was to get the state's share back to where it was sort of pre-ACEs, and stabilize it so that as producers benefited from increased production, the state would benefit from increased revenues. And that's not what's going on. What as we're clearly seeing in the FY25 in the new revenue sources book, as we're clearly seeing, production is going up, but the state's share of revenues on a per barrel basis is going down significantly, and that's resulting in overall revenues staying flat. There's a few other calculations I did. I tried to disaggregate this further and look at what's going on a royalty basis and what's going on a production tax basis to disaggregate those. On a royalty basis, we're staying relatively constant. You can see some decline over the period. Pre-ACEs, the state share of royalty was about 11.4% of a barrel. During the ACEs era, it was not that different from that. It was about 12.4% of the barrel of the price. Post ACEs, it's 11.5% of the price, and in the going forward era, it's about 10.9% of the price. They're all staying within a range. The royalty's staying. That's UGF royalty. They're all staying within a range. The production tax, however, and you can clearly see what's driving going on in the whole period from 2000 to 2033. The production tax is just dropping like a rock. During the pre-ACEs era, production tax, the production tax component of price was 6.9%. So 6.9% of each dollar that the producers received for the oil, 6.9% of that went to the state as production tax. During the ACEs era, it went to 20.6%. And that's a huge jump, and that's what's really driving the increase in the price during the ACEs era. And that's why SB21 was focused on production tax, getting that number corralled and getting that number back down to a competitive level so that we attracted investment. We sort of, as you can see from in the next tranche, in the next bracket, from in the post ACEs era, from 2015 to 2024, it sort of overcorrected. It went from 6.9% pre-ACEs, 20.6% post-ACEs, down to 5.7% in the SB21 era to date. And then look at what happens. So that's a 1.2% drop from the pre-ACEs era, which I think is what people thought they were trying to get back to. It's a 1.2% drop from the pre-ACEs era, from 6.9% down to 5.7% under SB21. But look what happens in the forecast period. Production tax as a percent of price drops from 5.7% down to 4.1%, and you can't blame that on the fact that some of the production is shifting to NPRA, because production tax applies to NPRA. We don't get royalty from production from NPRA, but we do get production tax on production from NPRA. So that's not the result of the shift to federal lands over that period. That's the result of sort of SB 21 gone wild. SB 21 intended
right.
This is going down.
Brad, I'm sorry we're up against the break here, hard break. So I'll give you a chance at the beginning of the next segment to finish that and give us your final thoughts on that before we move to number 2. But we ran long. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
This is what Brad and I have been talking about for a while here. This is what's going on when it comes to the fact that there's still money left on the table, is that we have these, and this is Alaska in a nutshell. We have these wild overcorrections from one side of the boat to the other, whether it's on the oil taxes, whether it's on the revenues. You know, it's high cotton season. We spend like it's going out of style. All of a sudden, oh my God, we're in a drought, and we get, it's that picture of the freaking. I should get a video of the Pirates of the Caribbean where they're running back and forth across the boat trying to roll the boat over. I mean, that's exactly what we do. We race from one side to the other, over and over and over again. And this is exactly what is wrong with Alaska right here in a nutshell, Brad.
No, I think that's exactly right. And getting that picture, maybe that ought to be the Alaskans for Sustainable Budget's motto or our profile photo. But that's exactly what's going on. I mean, so SB 21 was ACES was way too much. Way too much of an overcorrection in terms of taking additional money from the producers and deterring investment as a result. We recognize that in 5 years, and between 2008 and 2014, we got it back under control in 2013. Got it back under control and did SB 21 and corrected for that overcorrection. But nothing's perfect. You don't think through every scenario, and you don't think through every facet when you're trying to correct something. And that's why you leave yourself the ability to correct it later on. Now we've gone 10 years between 2014 when we did the correction against ACES in 2024, and you can see from the percent take, the one constant that you can sort of draw through all these periods, you can see from the percent take that we've overcorrected, that SB 21 overcorrected. Not hugely. I mean, it went from focusing specifically on production tax, it went from 6.9% pre-ACES to 5.7 post-ACES, but an overcorrection. And you need to go in, you need to deal with the factors that are in SB 21, not to jump back to ACES. God, that'd be a disaster. But to correct what you did in SB 21. If we don't, what we see with the spring revenue forecast is we're on this continued slide that SB 21 keeps overcorrecting and takes us down to 4.1% as production tax as a percent of barrel. And I have started going back through 1982 or 1979, whenever we started production taxes, but I'm going to bet a lot that 4.1% that we're seeing, a percent of take by production tax that we're seeing in the upcoming 10-year forecast is the lowest in history, lowest take by the state in history.
Chris says, and Chris, I'm going to disagree with you here because we're not talking about the reasoning behind it, but you are right. Chris says ACES was an overcorrection because of the Vico bribery scandal. Why does everyone always leave that out when talking about ACES? Because we're talking about ACES in broad general terms. We're not talking about the reason behind ACES. I agree with you. There was some backlash that definitely contributed to that. But again, we have this habit of overcorrecting one way or the other, and I think this is just another prime example. Donna says, useful analysis. She said, I'd like to see the trend lines. Well, Brad said you're going to try and chart this up here for Friday, right? So maybe we'll see some trend lines there.
I like it when people on the show give me work assignments.
That's what we're here for. We're here just to get, and your homework, good sir, is the following.
Yes. I know it took you 3 days or 5 days of work to get all this, but would you do something else that would take another 3 days?
Don't complain about the work that you got. This is what the fans want. So you just gotta, you gotta do it. If you're going to dole out the beatings, they would like to be beaten in a certain way. So so I don't know. I don't think Brad is saying go back to the 22.5% level. I think he's saying we've got to find an equitability factor in there, and we're definitely not seeing it right now.
I am far from saying going back.
Yeah.
Well, on an overall state take, yeah, probably 22.7%.
All right. Well, we're going to go back, and he's going to summate for us before we jump into number 2 real quick here because we ran long. Let's go here. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're continuing now. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We didn't finish number 1, which is unusual. But, Brad, you're going to summate here on the oil and gas and the production tax and what your final thoughts are on this. Give us your thing.
Well, Michael, what's showing up in both the past history since SB 21 and particularly in the Department of Revenue's spring forecast is that the state's take as a percent of oil price is going down quickly. And I think that's a sign that SB 21 overcorrected for the problems that were created by ACEs. We've seen it over the last 10 years as revenues have gradually declined as a percent of price over the last 10 years. But the spring revenue forecast shows us that decline is not only continuing, it's increasing. The rate of decline is increasing. And the result is the state's take from oil the state's revenue is not following increased production. The state's revenue is staying flat because our percent of take is going down. We need to readdress oil taxes in a way that corrects the overcorrections of SB 21. And we need to do it soon.
Sooner rather than later, obviously, because we're down the rabbit trail here. All right, well, let's move on to number 2, which is again still no movement on Cook Inlet oil and gas. What's going on here?
So we revisited the South Central gas issue several times on the show. Back in January, back in March, May, maybe, March, the producer or the utilities were hauled in before the Regulatory Commission of Alaska and asked to explain what their rules were if there were shortages in gas supply, what their existing rules were if there were shortages in gas supply. And that was intended as the first step in the RCA's review of the Cook Inlet gas situation to understand what the baseline is, what utilities would do if there were shortages. But that was intended as the first step, as a predicate to the second step, which was, okay, let's avoid shortages. What are we going to do to avoid shortages? That question got asked a few times at the end of the utilities presentations, sort of as a setup for the next intensity. Got asked a few times at the end of the utilities presentations, and almost to a person, the utilities answered, "Well, we're looking at LNG. We're looking at a number of options." And then the question was asked, "When do you need to make a decision to avoid these shortages that we're concerned about? When do we need to make a decision on the way forward on alternative supplies, LNG supplies?" And the answer, almost to a person, was, "Well, we should have made it. We should have made it previously. We should have made it at some point before now. But we absolutely have to make it by the end of the second calendar quarter." Well, the end of the second calendar quarter ended on June 30th. And to our knowledge, to the public's knowledge, there has been no decision made. All NSTAR has done is filed for a $50 million pipeline that would go into Port McKenzie on the Matsu side, would go into Port McKenzie to transport gas from a theoretical, not yet filed for, not yet applied for, LNG regasification plant that would be located at Port McKenzie. Nobody's filed for such a plant. Nobody's really talked about such a plant. But NSTAR's filed for. That's it. That's all that's been done by the end of the second quarter. And we need to get on with it. I mean, it's going to take a while to get an LNG plant certified. We've got an existing LNG plant on the Kenai that could be used for this purpose, but it has to be the authorizations it has, the permits it has, needs to be expanded a little bit from where it is, because right now it can only be used by Marathon for internal purposes at their refinery down on the Kenai. Those permits need to be expanded to include the authorization for resale from gas, LNG regasified at that plant. And we also need to, be contracting for LNG and a few other things that are going to take some time. This failure to act is putting us in a situation where down the road, we indeed are going to have a crisis, because we're not putting in place the things we need to do now to avoid that crisis down the road. In the meantime, we got people doing crazy talk. I mean, there was an op-ed a couple of weeks ago in the Anchorage Daily News by one of the candidates for the legislature, Walter Featherly, who's running as an independent against Julie Colomb, and Featherly was re-upping basically a column he had done earlier in December, saying we need ADA. Of all people, we don't need ADA, but we need ADA to step in and buy these fields and make investments in these fields and take over production in these fields and develop these existing Cook Inlet fields to avoid the crisis. The last thing, essentially nationalize the gas fields in the Cook Inlet, at least some of the gas fields in the Cook Inlet, nationalize them and turn them into state properties and turn them into essentially turn the oil and gas industry in the Cook Inlet into a state utility. That's the last thing we need. We need private sector signals. We need market signals about what the best way forward is. And the market signals we've gotten out of last year's utility report, the market signals we've gotten is LNG is the best option going forward. But we have to do it in order for it to be a realistic option. So here we are. We've passed the end of the second quarter. We passed the failed safe date, the drop dead date that we have to do something by. Not only is there no public discussion of utility decisions on notwithstanding their statements that has to be made by the end of the second quarter, not only are there no public statements by the utilities of what they're going to do, but they still haven't released the second phase of the analysis that they said they were going to do this year, the second phase of the analysis that showed what the best way forward was. So not only are we not having decisions made, they're withholding the information that enables the public to assess and get on board with what the right decision is. They're withholding the information.
And this comes back to what we've talked about before, where the RCA should be the one, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, should be the one that's dropping the 10-ton hammer on them, saying you have a fiduciary and a responsibility to the people to get this out there. I mean, again, we were supposed to see the second report, which would have said what they could do, and it's going nowhere at this point. So we're all kind of spinning, and it's like it's creating this fervor and this crisis of. It's a crisis making a crisis, essentially, in the long run. But it's a crisis of their own making because they're refusing to move forward with it.
Yeah, exactly right. And in the meantime, you got people out there spinning these crazy talk approvals, and you got the legislature. Thank God it didn't approve the subsidies for the producers in the Cook Inlet. But you got the legislature spinning off and doing various things. You got legislative candidates spinning off and doing various things. This is simple. This is very, very simple. You've got a report. You said you paid for a report. Ratepayers have paid for a report through their rates, have paid for a report that shows what the numbers are on the solutions. You've got that. You haven't released it. You've said yourself that you need to make decisions by the end of the second quarter to avert the crisis down the road. You haven't made those, at least publicly. Why? What is going on that justifies you talking about a crisis? I mean, John Sims loves to talk about the crisis. What justifies you talking about the crisis, but not disclosing the pieces that we need, that the public needs to assess what the right direction is to resolve the crisis?
So what is the solution here? The solution is the RCA do its job.
Yep, exactly right. The RCA needs to hold a hearing that says, all right, we know we got a crisis. You keep telling us we got a crisis. We've had the first round of hearings on what you're going to do if the crisis hits. Now, let's have a round of hearings on what you're doing to avoid the crisis, and let's have a release of the second half of the report that tells us, what the numbers are behind the solution. If the numbers in that report say, look, it is better, it is more economic to continue to focus on the Cook Inlet without subsidies, or even with subsidies, it's still cheaper than the alternative of LNG, then fine. If that's what the report shows, let's analyze the report. If that's what it shows, let's go down that road. But we can't go down any road, and we got crazy talk going on. We can't go down any road if we don't see the report.
Right.
And so the RCA needs to hold a hearing that says, second half of our hearing, what are you going to do to avoid the crisis? Publicly disclose the report so people can analyze and get behind the right solution to deal with this crisis. The crisis that we're going to hit in 2 years is in the making right now. And the utilities aren't doing anything right now to prepare for it. And the RCA isn't doing anything right now to prepare, to get the public behind whatever needs to happen to solve the crisis that's 2 years down the road.
Quickly, Terry asks, how do we pressure the RCA to do their job and protect our energy? And Brian says, does the legislature have any authority on this? What's your choice?
The legislature does have a lot of authority, but it's not exercising it in the right way. The way to pressure the RCA is write letters to them, write public letters that will have to go in the public docket, asking them to address this situation. And I'm going to write a letter and I will post it, and people can, either adopt it or not. But that's the right way to pressure the RCA, to have a public letter writing campaign that they have to put in their public docket about about their failure to act.
All right. More homework for you, Brad. You got to write a letter that you can then post on the program here, and listeners can then send to the email. I'll provide an email address and everything. We'll do it. All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're coming up on the break. We got more coming up. The number 3 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with Truth Tuesdays in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more on Brad Keithley right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
And Harold, you're not wrong. Too much wrestling with issues with little to no verifiable data. You can't make sound policy without knowing where you stand. That's what Brad's saying. Where's the secondary report? Where's the solutions? Where's what, they keep saying we have this problem, and then they look at you. We have this problem. Okay, what's your solution? Oh, but it's a problem. Yes, we know it's a problem. What's your solution? Brad, I know I know Kevin McCabe has talked about this before, and a couple others, because you've mentioned the Marathon facility several times, that it was an export facility that has been turned into a limited import facility for Marathon, and it has, and you've argued that this is the easiest way. Why do we need to build a $50 million pipeline and a multi-million-dollar gasification facility on the Point Mac when we have the Marathon facility down there and storage and everything else? They're saying, well, it's not as easy as you think. I mean, I don't think you ever said it was easy, but it's at least partially done. I mean, it's already partway there, right? I mean, it would be easier than building a whole new facility.
Well, yeah, it's going to be easier than building a whole new facility. And even if the long-term solution is to build one at Point Mac, even if that, I don't think that's right, but even if the long-term solution is to build one at Point Mac, we've got an existing one sitting in Kenai, authorized at least to supply LNG to Marathon. They haven't done the construction necessary to turn it yet, but they're authorized to do the construction, authorized to at least to supply Marathon. It's an existing one. We have to make some investment to turn it around. We have to make a little bit of investment to connect it to the pipes that NSTAR has down there and other pipes that are down there. But at least it's something. At least it will get us over the hump. I mean, Cook Inlet doesn't suddenly disappear on a day. Cook Inlet is in decline, like most normal oil and gas fields. Cook Inlet is in decline, and that decline doesn't just suddenly fall off the table at some point. It continues a soft decline. So as you have a soft decline, you need a soft ramp up of an alternative supply to keep the supply there. The Marathon facility can do it at least for a period of time. And if Port McKenzie is a better answer, then let's get on with it. Let's have the data out there that shows Port McKenzie is a better answer. Let's have the data that shows how much Port McKenzie is going to cost. Let's have the data. I mean, let's just get on with something. This period of time that we're thrashing about, and we're getting crazy talk from legislative candidates about having the state take all this over. The period of time that we're going through right now is costing us time at the back end in terms of having a solution in place when the Cook Inlet does hit the point that people are concerned about. And okay, fine. Kevin, if Port McKenzie's better, let's have the data on Port McKenzie and let's go down that road.
Let's not keep dithering, right? Because this is, again, another Alaskan problem. We see the problem. We know the problem's coming. We know that there's a long tail on fixing the problem, and yet we dither until it becomes a super crisis, and then we make very poor choices, usually, at a state level that become very expensive because, that's what's going on here. And somebody just said, didn't Marathon recently sell that facility in Nikiski? I don't know if they did or not. Terry says, would Marathon be willing to do it? I don't know. Has Marathon made any comments on whether they'd be willing to be the import facility, Brad? I don't know.
There was, in October, Marathon issued a press release that said they were considering what it would take and considering going for the permits necessary to expand the regasification process. And that's the last public statement Marathon's made about it. They stated they were considering doing that. It's a matter of economics. I mean,
right.
Would they do it for free? No. Would they do it for some certain set of money? Yes. So it's getting on with the economics. I don't know. I've not seen any public reports that Marathon has sold that LNG regasification, sold the LNG facility.
Well, one way or the other, Point Mac or Marathon, one of the two, let's get cracking, essentially, is what you're saying here. And yeah.
The more time we waste at the front end, the more time we have, exposed at the back end.
Yeah, exactly. And Bradley, I think, summates it best. He says, just because it might not be easy to reverse the flow at Marathon doesn't mean it's not possible, and doesn't mean that it might not, in the long run, be cheaper than building a whole new plant and getting a whole new plant permitted and getting all the. I mean, it's not just building it; it's the permits and everything else that are attached to it that take the time. And if you got something already stood up, well, there you go. So. But we've got to have the information. We've got to have, decision making is easy once you have all the facts. And we have about half the facts here and a lot of supposition going on.
And this isn't a situation where, private enterprise should keep their information private in a competitive market. This is a situation where we've got a monopoly in terms of NSTAR and the other utilities. They're making decisions that will affect the public. So the public has a right to know the information that they're considering. Yeah,
maybe we should commission a study that studies the study of the previous study that we already studied before we study the final study. I'm just saying, I'm going to form a new company just for that right there. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show, not your daddy. Wait, sorry, not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3, what we lovingly call Truth Tuesdays. Trying to give you a little truth. It may hurt, but it's just the truth. We're going to talk now about the Alaska anomaly. which has to do with the Alaska workforce. Brad, I got some charts here that you threw me, so let's get to it here. What do we got?
So there was an article from January popped up in my feed someplace in one of the social media feeds. Somebody was making the point that people are fleeing high tax states to low tax states, and they attached an article, a good analysis from the Tax Foundation, Conservative Tax Foundation, that focuses on this issue. And here's what the Tax Foundation said, that indeed there is a population shift going on. Americans were on the move, and many chose low tax state over high tax ones. The population shift paints a clear picture. The population shift paints a clear picture. Americans are leaving high tax, high cost of living states in favor of low tax, low cost alternatives. Of the 32 states whose overall state and local tax burdens per capita were below the national average in 2022, 24 experienced net bound migration in 2023. And they go on to explain that that there's this giant move going on that is focused on people moving from high tax states to low tax states. Here's the interesting fact of it. Alaska is one of the lowest tax states. When you look at the tax factors that the Tax Foundation and the study on which they were basing their article works, they were looking at state and local taxes and state and local taxes, sales, property taxes, other things. And Alaska always comes in as one of the lowest tax states when you do that analysis. But when they talk about where people are moving, the U.S. Census Bureau's most recent interstate migration shows that New York lost the greatest share of its population, a high tax state, to other states between July 2022 and July 2023. Not far behind was California, another high tax state, which lost 9.9% of its residents, followed by Hawaii, another high tax state, 0.8%. Illinois, 0.7%, another high tax state. Included in that group, Alaska. This is what it says. Not far behind was California, Hawaii, Alaska, and Illinois. So what the heck's going on here? I mean, the Alaska anomaly is, we say we've got low taxes, and we say that we have, that we're welcoming in terms of migration, but we have people leaving us as if we were a high tax state. We are in the same sentence in terms of net migration, net out migration. We are in the same sentence with California, Hawaii, and Illinois. Alaska's in that same sentence. So the anomaly is, what the heck's going on? And I want to sort of refocus on an analysis we did earlier in the year that looks at this. We did an Alaska landmine column that said, what's really going on with working age Alaska families? That's when the big mantra down at the legislature was, we're losing working age Alaska families. We have to do things to save, to bring people back, that we have this out migration going on. And here's the chart. Here's the chart we did. Michael's got it up on the screen. For those on the radio, I'll try to talk through it. Here's the chart we did, looking at federal income tax data and where the income of families that were filing federal income tax returns. And that's one way of following by income bracket, following who's staying. If the numbers are going up, if the number of returns filed from a certain state are going up, then people are increasing in that state. If the number of returns go down, you can generalize that the number of people in those income brackets are leaving the state. And there is no confusion about what these numbers show. These numbers show that in the income brackets of $200,000 of income, adjusted gross income, $200,000 and up, the number of the people in Alaska are increasing. We have net in-migration, and these are people 60 and below, age 60 and below. We have net in-migration of people with incomes of $200,000 and above. We're attracting people with high incomes. But in terms of incomes of $200,000 and below, we're losing people. and we're losing more and more people the lower the income levels go. That is where the out-migration is among working Alaska families. So when you look at the Alaska anomaly, why with these apparent low taxes are we having out-migration? You at least can see the out-migration is going on in the lower income brackets, and an increased in-migration is going on above in the upper income brackets. We're having net in-migration. So what's the cause of that? And one thing you can tie this to, one thing that overlays on this very neatly, is the impact of PFD cuts. That PFD cuts take more and more and more. They're hugely regressive. They take more and more and more the lower your income. So middle and lower income Alaska families pay much more as a percent of income than upper income Alaska families. And Michael's got a chart here that shows the level of government take, including PFD cuts from Alaska families. And you can show from the fourth 20%, which is about 150,000, from the fourth 20% on, the tax bite, the level of take on Alaska families is growing significantly. The upper income are paying less as a percent of income than middle and lower income Alaska families. So the upper income is growing. The number of people in the upper income brackets are growing. The number of people in the lower income brackets is declining. Working age families, age 60 and less, are declining. What that's telling me is frankly that Alaska does have a tax, and that it's impacting Alaska in exactly the same way as it's impacting California, Illinois, and the other high cost states. And that tax is coming in the form of PFD cuts. It is removing income from middle and lower income Alaska families disproportionately from upper income families. Those families are leaving Alaska. Middle and lower income Alaska families are leaving Alaska in the same way that you see in California, Illinois, New York, Hawaii, the other states that Alaska is listed with in this analysis. They're leaving Alaska in the same way. And upper income people who are not adversely affected by PFD cuts are coming to Alaska. And so, it's great that we're getting upper income people, but we're bleeding out middle and lower income Alaska families. 80% of Alaska families fall in the middle and lower income brackets, and we're bleeding those people out. So I think the Alaska anomaly that shows up in these tax numbers is explained by the impact of PFD cuts, and all of these analyses that don't look at PFD cuts as taxes are missing the point of what's driving the Alaska response.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And we've seen this, Brad, again and again and again, where we're looking at this, and we know that specifically this is because they have continued to spend at an unsustainable rate, and the PFD is the only thing there, and that's what's driving more and more of these working age, especially the younger Alaskans, out who are trying to get a toehold. They're trying to make $25,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 a year, and yet they're being taxed at an incredible rate when you compare it to other states.
Yep, exactly right. And the top income brackets, the ones that we're getting anyway, the top income brackets are being subsidized by those PFD cuts. Essentially, PFD cuts are going to pay the taxes the top 20% otherwise should pay. Top 20% non-residents and the oil companies otherwise should be paying. PFD cuts are being used to subsidize those. And the consequence is we're bleeding out 80% people across 80% of the income brackets in Alaska, middle and lower income brackets in Alaska. That explains the Alaska anomaly. And people who are trying to find different reasons for it really aren't touching on the real reason.
All right, Brad. So 60 seconds. How do we fix it? I mean, how do we fix it? Give it to me quick here.
Well, we need to do two things. We need to make the tax, recognizing that PFD cuts are taxes. We need to make the tax broader. We need to include non-residents. We need to get a part of the oil income that we're losing as a result of SB 21 overcorrecting we need to address those other brackets, and we need to have the top 20% pay a proportionate share of the cost, along with and use that revenue then to reduce the burden on middle and lower income brackets. That will also, I think, reduce spending, because once the top 20% non-residents and oil companies have to pay for spending, they're going to push back on spending.
They'll get involved at that point instead of just, oh, hey, it's high cotton season, somebody else will pay. Now we have to pay. It's a thing. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend, for the weekly top 3. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. That chart is pretty stark. When you look at that chart is pretty damn stark. I'm going to pull it back up there again here so people, come on, my thing was not cooperating. When you look at that one chart there, and you look at the lowest 20% is taking a 22% bath versus the top 20% taking 7% or lower, all the way up to 3.5% if you're in the top 1%. But you just look at that, and even in the middle class, I mean, they're getting soaked for 10% on the way by. And you wonder why people are leaving, because Alaska was already an expensive place to live, and now as a cost per capita, as far as income, you're taking a big chunk of their income out the door.
Yeah, what I think this list leads you to think about is PFDs were really a way of softening the high cost of Alaska for middle and lower income Alaska families, and it was a supplemental source of income from a heritage source of income. Permanent fund earnings, invested permanent fund, and permanent fund earnings. It was a way of softening the cost of living. As we're stripping that away, as we're taxing away PFD cuts, we're exposing middle and lower income Alaska families to the Alaska high cost of living in a way we haven't before. And we're protecting the top 20% non-residents and oil companies from experiencing the same high cost of living, because we're paying their share of taxes for state government. And so as middle and lower income Alaskans sort of address this, a high cost of living not getting softened by PFDs, they're leaving. I mean, that's what the data tells you. They're leaving. And that's why we have the Alaskan anomaly showing up in these national tax views of why is Alaska, which claims to have low taxes, but why is Alaska showing up in the same category as California, Illinois, and Hawaii? Why is it in that bracket of outmigration as opposed to the net immigration that the tax analysis would tend to make you think? And it's because we're taking away the PFDs from middle and lower income Alaska families and taking away that softening impact on the high cost of living.
Because they list Alaska as a low tax state, yet we're in amongst all the highest tax states as far as outmigration. And this may answer Randy's comment, which is, this is supposed to be Truth Tuesday. It's not true that PFD cuts are a true tax. Anyone who believes that rhetoric may not understand the definition of a government tax. But I think I will take Matt Berman's point of view over yours, Randy, since he's an economist and a tax. I mean, he's the one that said it is a tax. Maybe not fitting into your cozy little definition of what a tax is, but it is a tax. That's what Berman says. And that's what those outmigration numbers show. I mean, on paper, Alaska may be a low tax state, but in reality, when they take that much of your income, it's a tax.
Well, let's call it something else. It's a reduction in income. No one can argue it's not a reduction in income. Taxes are reductions in income, but no one can argue that PFD cuts aren't reductions in income. And that's what we're doing to middle and lower income Alaska families. We're taking away the PFD income that offset the high cost of Alaska living. And we're shifting the benefit of that over to the top 20%. So we're getting a lot more top 20% in. Hooray, yay for us. But we're not getting 80%. We're losing the 80%. We're losing the bulk of Alaska families, the middle and lower income Alaska families. That's the workers. You talk about a worker shortage. Well, it's because we're driving them out of the state in a way that looks a lot like California, Illinois, and Hawaii. And why are we driving them? How are we driving them out of the state? We're taking away the benefit that PFDs gave against the high cost of living.
Ron Gillum says, so a 15% flat tax would essentially give lower income families a raise and cause the upper 20% to pay their fair share. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. We don't need a 15% flat tax. More like a 5% flat tax would be sufficient if you include non-residents and you include some pickup from the oil companies. But that's exactly right. It would give lower middle. I mean, people always talk about lower. It would give middle, the 60% that are in the middle, it would give middle income families a raise.
Yeah, because again, according to that chart, middle income families are paying over 10%. So again, a 5% flat tax would give everybody from the 80% down a raise, and then spread the burden higher with the higher income brackets as well.
Yep.
All right, Brad, got a minute and a half here. So final thoughts on all these things we just hit on today. There's a lot, but your final thoughts here for today.
Well, Michael, I think the final thought is summed up by the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? I think it's summed up by we run from one side of the boat on the Cook Inlet gas. We run from one side of the boat on oil revenues, oil taxes. We run from one side of the boat on PFDs. We run from one side of the boat to the other, and we're not doing a good job on any of it. I mean, we're stretching out the transition period on Cook Inlet gas by not addressing the issue now, just hitting it straight on and doing what the economics tell us we ought to be doing. We're not doing the right thing with oil revenues, with oil taxes, because we run to the other side, but we're not correcting for having, tipping over on that side and coming back to the middle. And we're doing the same thing with the Alaska anomaly. We're doing the same thing by overtaxing middle and lower income Alaska families and subsidizing the top 20%. And we're losing workers. We have out migration as a result of that, on par with California, Texas, or California, Hawaii, and Illinois. We're having out migration because we've overcorrected by how we're dealing with the PFD.
All right, Brad, I think that's it for today, my friend. As always, it's great stuff. I appreciate you being part of it today. Thanks for coming on board and joining us.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Have a great week, my friend. Thanks for coming on board. All right, folks, that's it for this hour. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. Happy birthday to John Ross, who said today is his 35th birthday. So happy birthday, John. I hope you are enjoying your next trip around the sun. All right, welcome to hour 2 of this beautiful Tuesday morning. And of course, Tuesdays, we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And we dove into that weekly top 3. And there's some interesting things to talk about with that. And specifically, I want to address Randy is one of the chatters in the chat room, and he consistently talks about how the PFD taking is not a tax and all this other kind of stuff, and he doesn't want to do things. During the break, Ron Gillum asked a question of Brad that I think was important. I think this was during the break. I don't think we were doing it while we were on the air, but I'll reiterate it just in case we missed it. So in all this talk that we were talking about with Brad, with this out-migration of people in Alaska, because look, it has a knock-on effect that's huge, right? I mean, all the education things, part of it has to do with the decline in enrollment, right? The lack of workers in the state of Alaska has to do with the out-migration of working age and working class Alaskans who are just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't do the high cost of living, the high gas, the cold winters, all this kind of stuff. I'll go to, I don't know, fill in the blank, Tennessee or someplace where I can go and, or Texas, I'll do something. And we're seeing that. And Randy keeps saying, well, it's not a tax. It's not a tax. It's not a tax. Ron Gillum asked the question. So a 15% flat tax would essentially give lower income families a raise and cause the upper 20% to pay their fair share. Is that a fair statement? Brad said, yes, but you wouldn't need a 15% flat tax. He said a 5% flat tax. And based on the charts that he was using previously, where he showed the government take as a share of taxes, the lowest 20% is paying 22, almost 23% in taxes if you include the PFD cut. And even the middle class or upper middle class is paying almost 10% in that. It's only the top 20% that are paying, between 3% and 7% for the taxes. And so Brad said you wouldn't even need a 15% tax. You'd only need a 5% tax to offset it. Everybody would essentially then pay an equitable amount and it would be good. Now, I know before everybody loses their mind and goes on about, well, you're advocating taxes. I'm saying taxes are inevitable at this point. If you don't believe that, you have not been paying attention. Taxes in this state, first of all, they're already going on in the form of a PFD tax. Whether you call it a tax or not, it's a taking of government. It's a taking of your money by the government before you see it. That's a tax. It's a withholding tax, essentially. But taxes are already going on now. But new taxes, different taxes, are inevitable. It's as inevitable, well, death and taxes, right? It's as inevitable as the sun setting and rising tomorrow. It is going to happen. If you've spent any time looking at the 10-year forecast, at the projections of budgets, at where the oil revenue is actually going, at where the spending trajectory is actually going, taxes are inevitable. Why? Because the legislature, all the legislatures, have been unable to curb their appetite for spending. Period. Full stop. So taxes are inevitable. So really what we should be doing is asking the question, okay, if taxes are inevitable, what is the best form of tax to fix this? Now, we could go back to, and Brad said it again during the break, but he said, a 5% sales tax with an adjustment to the SB 21 and the oil taxes, increasing some oil taxes there, along with some spending limits and some cuts, would bring the state back under control. That's what it is. Randy goes on to say, but please don't raise taxes on me and other private sector workers who are in the bottom 80%, no income tax. The problem, if you're in the bottom 80%, for example, a 5% flat tax would in fact be a raise for you. It would be less than what you're paying right now. Yes, taxes are bad. Okay. I mean, you've got me on that. I 100% agree. Taxes are horrific. But the problem is that is how the world is going round right now. There is no other way to fund government at its current level other than some form of tax, whether that's a taking of the PFD or whether that's a flat tax or a consumption tax like a sales tax. That is how government has been funding itself for over 150 years. Taxation is theft? Yes, it is. But we've got to, we've got to choose It's like pick your poison. You know you're going to be poisoned. Do you want the one that kills you or the one that just makes you sick? I mean, I hate to use those kind of analogies, but that's where we are. Again, because look at what's happening in Alaska. The number of people, the percentage of changes in the working age is tremendous. Everybody who's making under $100,000 a year is basically, the outmigration is all in that bracket. $100,000 a year and lower, they're leaving. The $10,000 to $25,000 a year people, they're leaving at a rate of like 15%. As you get higher and higher upwards towards a 75 to 100,000 bucks a year, they're only leaving at 6% of the percentage of people that have left. Meanwhile, the $200,000 and over crowd is increasing their residency by 18 to 20%. So, I mean, that's great. You got all the wealthier people, generally speaking, older and wealthier people coming into the state, but you have this mass outflow of people who are just working age, working class people, the service people, the people who are supposed to service all these rich cats that are coming in. And I want to be a rich cat. I'm not complaining about people making money. I'm saying when you have a disproportionate burden on the citizens, that's what you get. And when you look at the government take as a share of Alaska income, and you realize that the lowest 80% is accounting for, was it 50, 60? They're accounting for 70% of the take on this stuff. And that the highest income earners are paying a fraction of that, there's an inequity there. And I'm not saying tax the rich or soak the rich. I'm saying it should be equitable across the board. Joe Blow driving the old beat-up Chevy truck should pay just as much as a portion of his income as the guy driving the brand new Tesla truck, right? It should be the same as a percentage of their income. If you're going to pick a poison, that's the poison that I would choose to pick. So this idea, don't tax me. Their taxes are inevitable. The state income tax may be inevitable, but you don't have to rush it down upon us years in advance. It's not years. I mean, I'm sorry. Let me break it down for you here on this Truth Tuesday. Let me break it down for you here. We're talking about 24 to 36 months before the PFD is pretty much gone if they spend at the current trajectory. That's it. So it's not years in advance. And do you really want to wait to have this discussion about some form of tax when the legislature is in session and trying to figure out how to fill the hole? And they're going to make a decision right then? Or do you want to at least have a broad discussion about it between, would you at least want to have a discussion about it between now and then? I mean, it's frustrating. To me, this is frustrating because I can see it coming. I can see it happening. I can see where, the way things have gone over the last 20 years. I've been griping about this spending problem for years, where they treat it like it's a revenue problem, but it's really a spending problem. And now what has happened is the spending problem has led to both a revenue and a spending problem. I mean, it's crazy. Yes, fixing our revenue stream and getting back to pre-SB 21 revenues on oil monies would be a big jump. It would be a big help. But it's not a single source solution, as the Fiscal Policy Working Group discovered. It can't be just taxes. It can't be just oil taxes. It can't be just cuts, because there's no political will. I mean, if I was king for a day, boy, I'd go in there with a chainsaw and you could Javier Milei that stuff. But it's not going to happen. That's not how we work around here. The states that are losing populations, again, to be included in those luminaries like New York and California and Hawaii and Illinois, when they include Alaska in there, although on paper, Alaska looks like it's a super low tax state, you realize that that's not really the case. And then Jeannie says it's better to have a statewide sales tax. Okay. Well, no, I mean, if you want it, because that's what the Fiscal Policy Working Group said, right? They based it on Donna will remind me if it was North or South Dakota. One of the Dakotas, it was based on their 2.5 or 2.7% sales tax was the discussion in the fiscal policy. Okay, a sales tax versus an income tax. Okay, that but again, it's regressive. There's lots of caps on things and things like that. So maybe I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe it would cap more. Ben Carpenter essentially is, I think he summates what I've just been saying to say, do you want a PFD and a tax or no PFD and a tax? Because the latter is where we're headed with our status quo inflationary growth. That's what I'm trying to say. The tax is inevitable. And if we continue holding our nose or putting our fingers in our ears and going, la, 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 I can't hear you, la, 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 I can't hear you, then what'll happen is the PFD will be gone and we'll have a tax anyway. I just don't know. I just don't know why we should not be talking more about this. And the one thing that we continue to really, we touch on it occasionally, but we don't really focus on it, is with all things, the PFD could be the greatest entrepreneurial engine in the history of the country. If we were getting paid a full PFD, people could be taking that money and creating new products, new services, new businesses. They could be creating new empires, new jobs for people. There are things that could be done, but all that money is being sucked up by the state, and all they care about is the public economy. It was South Dakota. Thank you, Donna. South Dakota had that tax that they modeled in the Fiscal Policy Working Group. But I mean, that's the thing. All this money that's being sucked up by government that's not turning in the economy. Remember, there is every time a dollar gets injected into a public economy versus a private economy, there's a multiplier in there, right? For a private economy, it's like a dollar turns 6 or 7 times. I pay the plumber pays the supplier. The supplier goes out to a night of dinner and buys food. The restaurant that he bought the food from then buys advertising from me. The money just turns in the economy, right? Whereas with the government, it turns less than 1 time. It's Ben says we need to be talking about a private economy that's capable of funding government. Private economy equals private jobs. Larger permanent fund equals more government jobs. Again, that separation of the public and the private economy. The government economy and the private economy, they don't really care as long as the government economy is taken care of. It's all good. It's so frustrating to see all, when we're again in the company of New York and California and Illinois, and that's where everybody's outflowing from because of the high taxes. And then they say, but Alaska really doesn't have a tax. Is it true? What does it show? If it quacks like a duck, it waddles like a duck, it swims like a duck, by God, it's probably a duck. All right. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll return with more in just a moment. Chris Story's coming up at the end of the show. We'll need a little positivity by then. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Amy says taxes are evil. Yes. Taxation is theft. I agree. Totally. But if you've given me the choice, well, it's not really a choice, is it? Amy, I could scream taxation is theft from the top of the rooftops, from my lungs, get it printed on my t-shirts, put bumper stickers on my car. Totally agree. Totally agree. But they're still going to force something down our throat. So shouldn't we pick the one that's the least damaging to our families, to the private economy, and everything else? Shouldn't we at least do it? I agree. I agree that it's wrong. It's evil. Unfortunately, I didn't have a say back in 1914 when they put that whole tax act in and they did all that. I was not part of the conversation. Oh, Greg says I would be on board with a flat tax. So would I, if that's what it took to get the job done. Now, would I want it to be implemented tomorrow? No. I mean, I'd like to see if we can pull it back. But again, it has to be implemented with a lot of other things. Number one being a spending cap, because if we got a flat tax right now, let's say they implemented a flat tax tomorrow of 3%, 4%, I don't know. Pick a number. Donna says 5%, we don't need it. Okay, that's fine. Pick a number, 3%. If we didn't have a spending cap, well, they would spend all of that new revenue plus the revenue from the permanent fund, and we'd be in a worse place than we are right now. That's why it has to be holistic. That's why it has to be all of those things. Fat Ray says, there are days I think Michael is something of a masochist, usually Tuesdays. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to face it. I don't want to say, I would love to just say, get a paring knife and just go in there and start carving things out of I would love to do that. The problem is there is no political will. There's no political will to make that happen. If it was just me and you, the listeners of this show, we could make it happen. There's 60 people watching right now on Facebook and YouTube. If you guys were all the legislature and I was the governor, 60 plus 1, we could cut the state government and we could fix it right now. The problem is we're not. I mean, you're on board with a flat tax now until it is increased level as taking the full PFD. Here's the thing, Frank, they're going to take it anyway. They're either going to take the PFD or we're going to have to find some other alternative form of tax. And again, I said I would not be on board with it unless there was a spending cap to make it happen. Donna's 100% right. Alaska needs a governor with political will. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Picking the lesser of two evils. Yeah, I mean that you're not wrong. The lesser of two. What if I told you the lesser of two evils was still evil, right? I mean, that's been my presidential conundrum for the last 20 years as I stand in the ballot booth and go, they're both evil. What do I do? Anyway, I guess I will get off this dead horse. I'm just so agitated by the whole thing. Harold says, trying to make ends meet, won't happen as long as the state has direct access to our resources. Well, I mean, that would be great, except for the statehood compact. We have no control over that. Yes, we live in we have a socialist constitution, and the PFD is the only capitalistic expression of that whole socialistic situation. I wasn't there during statehood. I wasn't voting for that. It's a system that I now have to live within. Unfortunately, that's where it comes down to. All right. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about next. Now I'm just agitated. You're right. I might be a masochist. That might be what this is all about. Here we go.
public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yeah. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I'm sorry. Somebody just said, hey, I think you're a bit of a masochist, especially on Tuesdays. And maybe I am a bit of a masochist. Maybe that's it. Maybe I like the pain. I don't know. But, again, I have been doing this show for 25 years. 25 years I've been doing this show, and I have literally been talking about the same things over and over. I have been fighting for them. I have been warning people against them, the size and scope of government, and nothing has changed. Nothing has, nobody in power has heeded the warning. Let's put it that way. And now we're reaching the end where, again, we could see the bridges out, and we're reaching that point of no return where even if we threw the brakes on today, it'd be an iffy proposition if the train doesn't spill over the edge. Joining me on the program for a quick second here is Ben Carpenter, representative from down in Nikiski. You've made some great comments here this morning, Ben, and so maybe, I don't know, talk me off the ledge. Am I right? Am I wrong? I know people are so furious about the idea that we could have taxes of any kind, but am I wrong? Is it not an inevitability?
Under the current status quo, I think it is. And if you just take a step back for a second and look at this kind of philosophically, we're living in a country where we value self-government, which means we have to find some way to pay for the things that we want. If we were to live under a kingship, for example, where we've got a king, then that king is going to make those decisions for us. He or she, if it's a queen, are going to say, hey, you know what, this is what we need, and I'm going to set the tax rate at whatever I think is necessary to pay for it. So just fundamentally, if we're going to live and continue to get along in a self-government, then we have to realize that we do need to pay for those things that we're asking for. And this is the crux of the problem in my mind. The government keeps growing because people are asking for things and they don't have to pay for it.
That's true.
We look at the permanent fund and we say, look at all of this money that doesn't cost us anything. Let's just fork it over to government. Well, then in the end, what is really the difference? You've got the difference between that and a king that's making your decisions on what the size of the government is. Now you've got a permanent fund investors who are deciding how big that fund grows, and the result of that is more money to spend on government. That's where we're headed. So if we're setting up a system, if we're monitoring a system that we've created, a self-government system in a state that's funding itself, we got to recognize that the system that we're about to allow happen is government growth at the size of the permanent fund. And so you got to ask yourself, is it still self-government at that point? Are we still making the decisions, or is it the money managers and the bureaucrats that are making the decision? Because the government's going to continue to grow either way. Either we're going to choose it because we're self-government, or it's just going to continue to grow because the bureaucracy has set itself up with an unlimited or a growing fund source.
Right. And
so philosophically, we got to ask, where does the private economy come into this picture? And it's got to be tied to what we're asking government to pay for, or what we're asking government to do and therefore pay for.
Right. Well, and that's the big discovery for me over the last 15, 18 months, is that there has become this divide between the public and the private economy where they just don't. I mean, legislators literally telling other legislators, well, the government economy is fine. That's the important one. That is the economy. Just completely discounting. And the chart that we just looked at from Brad shows exactly that. The lower income, the working class folks leaving the state in droves because they can't make it anymore because the legislature has completely forgotten and abandoned the private economy. As long as government contractors and union workers are paid, everything's rosy. But they forget about all the infrastructure and other things that are part of that in the private economy, and they just don't care.
Yeah, incentives matter. So we're setting up an incentive to not want additional Alaskans because our government is going to be funded by the permanent fund itself. Okay. If the goal is $100 billion and that kicks off 5% every year, that's $5 billion that pays for our operating and capital budget. Throw on your federal dollars and anyway, so it just pays for government. And you add people to the state, and that's just a burden. It's just a drain. It's additional services needed. Those people don't contribute. And so the bureaucracy and the voters are like, why do we want more people in Alaska?
Right. It's an incentive.
It's
incentivizes them to see this as an opportunity, right? They see this outflow as a huge opportunity. Oh, we can reduce the population of the state. We can get that 5% out of a $100 billion fund, and we can just live fat and happy on it. And it doesn't matter because that's where the money comes from. So as long as we keep the population low, we don't have to deliver any more services. We're golden.
Right, because it's not connected to the economy that is actually producing the revenue necessary to pay for what is being asked of government. So you're creating the wrong set of incentives by looking at the permanent fund as your source of money to pay for government. It's the easy way out.
Right, because the permanent fund doesn't vote. The permanent fund doesn't send you harshly worded letters about your vote on something or what you're doing. The permanent it's just neutral. It just keeps spinning money off, and you're like, okay, great. We don't have to deal with anything. We could just do it our way. There's no accountability mechanism in government.
That's right. And ultimately, what you're setting up is a handful of people who call the shots on what the government does. You want to send legislators down there? Great. But they're going to be lobbied, and they're going to be lobbied by the people who are actually pulling the strings on where the money goes and where it comes from, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to invest your permanent fund in?
Right.
Are you going to continue to grow, or are you going to pull back? Do you want cash? Do you not want cash?
Right.
Because that's the decisions being made right now by the decision makers on what the allocation is for the permanent fund. Do we allocate it in things that are more longer term and produce less cash up front that can be spent, or do we not? So we've got to understand that 49 out of 50 states rely upon their private economy to pay for their government,
right,
through one set of tax or another, or a combination of. Alaska is unique that we've been able to rely upon oil revenue, and we're replacing that oil revenue with permanent fund earnings. And the permanent fund earnings are wholly disconnected from our private economy, whereas oil was at least connected to our private economy.
Right.
This is a massive shift in the way we do spending or funding of state government that no other state does. And I think we need to wisen up to the dangers of disconnecting your private economy from the size of your government.
And again, I'm not advocating for some form of tax without controls. I mean, there has to be a spending cap, right? I mean, not only I know you tried to constitutionalize the PFD with HJR 7. That definitely has to be part of it. But at the very least, in the very beginning, it has to have a spending cap attached to it so that we don't have a runaway where we create some other form of tax and then that money just gets consumed, right? So we have to have a spending cap and it has to be holistic.
Well, if it's a spending cap, it has to be a constitutional one where you can't ignore it. You being the legislator, right?
True.
The legislature can't ignore it. Otherwise, the legislature, through its spending prerogative, is just going to ignore any kind of statutory cap that gets put in place. But I mean, this also goes to elections matter. You don't need a spending cap if you send people down there that aren't willing to spend it all, that are like-minded. It just speaks to, and I don't want to be disparaging here, but it speaks to a complex system that we have in the state, and very few people really truly understand it. If you boil this down to, taxes are evil, and that's the depth to which I'm thinking about the problem, then we don't have any solutions past that.
Right.
You've got to think about this in a little bit more complex of a problem and address it. Look at your root causes and look at your incentives for where you want to go.
Yeah, no, and I agree. When I say spending cap, in my mind, I'm already thinking that that it has to be constitutional, because we've seen the uselessness of statute in this state. I mean, it's already there. All right. Final thoughts here, Ben Carpenter, on this issue. I mean, I kind of opened it up to just, it's just so frustrating to me to see the actual numbers of people leaving, to see where the cost of government is actually falling, and this just continual blithe, path of, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine, it'll never fail. To see what exactly is going on and understand that we are inevitably on the path for taxes. Your final thoughts here.
Yeah, I believe that the status quo of doing nothing is going to consume our permanent fund dividend and create a situation where we have no other choice but to pay some additional tax for that additional government growth, or that continued government growth. That is the system that we're setting up, and it can be stopped, it can be changed, but it requires us to be doing a little bit deeper thinking about what it is that what we really want, and is the structure of our state government.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with this. And I just want to say thank you, because I know you've pushed very hard to try and get all the elements of the fiscal policy working group plan through Ways and Means. I know it was an uphill battle. I know that, we've stumbled across the finish line without really getting anything passed, but I know it's what you've been working on the whole time. And I appreciate your help on that. And I hope that you will be able to be more successful with it once you get into the Senate. So, Ben, thanks for calling in real quick this morning. I just wanted to get your thoughts on my thoughts. So I appreciate you being part of it.
My pleasure, Michael.
All right, hold the line for just 1 second. Folks, we're out of time. Chris Story's up next. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free Thinking Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Ben is still with us here for one final thing. Real quick, Ben, Fat Ray says, I don't see people being against new taxes or saying do nothing. I see everyone looking at the situation and seeing that there have been no further spending cuts and not wanting to further enable Juno. And that's, again, why I was saying there needs to be a constitutional spending cap along with everything else. But I wanted to give you just kind of final bite at the apple here, Ben, because we unloaded a lot in the last 9 minutes. So I just want to give you a final chat here.
Yeah, thanks. Alaskans cannot check out from what is going on in Juneau, and it is an incredible challenge, more so in our state than any other state, because we have this bubble that gets created around Juneau every legislative session, and very hard for legislators to see out, and very hard for the electorate to see in. But we can't check out. We've got to stay focused on requiring our government to care about what it is we want. And I just go back to we want an economy. There's a lot of other things that we can talk about what we want, but at the end of the day, we want to have a job, we want to have income, we want to be able to provide for our families, and that requires economic activity. It requires entrepreneurialism and jobs, and that is not what's required to pay for government for the majority of our state government now. And the status quo future, it's even less required. So if you want to incentivize the legislature to care about more jobs for your kids, then you have to incentivize the legislature to want more jobs for your kids. And they only do that through the pocketbook. That's the only way.
Yeah.
It's the only way to care what happens through the budget process and the decisions that get made is through the power of taxation. And nobody wants to pay taxes, right? But we don't live in a world where you get to ask for government and not pay for it. Somebody's going to pay for it. And if we want to say that we're going to rely on oil like we have been, well, oil companies pay the taxes and then the consumer pays the taxes because the oil company passes it on to the consumer. So somebody's paying the taxes somewhere. We don't live in a world where you just avoid paying taxes.
Right.
Whether it's transparent or not is the problem. So what kind of a system do we want? We got to grow Alaska, right? It's maturing right before our eyes, and we need something different than what we've had in the past in order to continue on into the future. And that cannot be paying for government completely with a permanent fund. That is a recipe for disaster for our private economy.
Yep, absolutely. Ben, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your fight and for all you do. And we'll talk to you again. We'll talk to you again here soon. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks so much. Ben Carpenter, our guest. I called him because he's engaged. I called him because he participates in the chat room, because he's frequently out there, and he's, I don't want to hear complaints about how, he's engaged. And that's what we need. We need somebody like that in the Senate who will be with us on that. Thank you, Ben Carpenter. All right, let me get Story on the line here before we get too far ahead here, and see if we can get him going on. Hey, look at that! That worked out good.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. If I was any better, I'd be Michael M. Dukes. What's your middle name?
Raymond.
Oh,
yeah.
MRD.
MRD.
Okay.
Merd. What? Yeah, MRD. Yep, that's my grandfather's name. My grandfather's name.
You can't spell murder without MRD.
That's right. That's true. You cannot spell murder.
And you are murdering the show this morning.
We're killing it, baby. We're killing it. How is Mr. Story today?
He's on top of the world. He's got a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel in his lap. She may begin to snore a little bit, but I doubt it. So Reagan is the famous snorer. So Tallulah is a little quieter.
Tallulah? Oh, Lord. Oh,
Tallulah.
Lord. Tallulah.
Well, that was Tiffany's nickname as a child. She had no hair for several years, and so she was called Tallulah Baldhead instead of Tallulah Baldwin. So anyway, so it was an obvious choice when we saw this little girl. She had to be Tallulah.
I'm sure she wanted you to share that little piece of history with us. I'm sure that was perfect. Sure. All right. What's our topic for today, my friend? What life lesson are you going to impart to us today?
It couldn't dovetail more closely with Ben Carpenter and his points unless it was made by an Amish craftsperson. It's so tightly fit together. It's instead of focusing on the economy this morning, we're going to talk about how to grow your economy, but it is just the flip side of his coin.
Okay. It's got to be your economy. Bill points out that you also can't spell murder without you. Okay. So on that point,
yeah, good point.
It got dark here real quick. All right, back with more Your Economy with Chris Story, the Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go. Okay, the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Story. ilovehomeralaska.com is his website. You could find out all about him, including where he lives, by going to that website, and you could see his books, his writings. Do you have pictures of your pottery up there, Chris? I mean, you should have a little bit of everything up on ilovehomeralaska.com.
You know what? Pottery page coming. As a result of this comment from you. That's a good idea.
That's a good idea. A little bit more about Chris. He is the Raku King of the world. Chris Story, of course, a realtor, an author, speaker, potter, and radio commentator, as well as a guru and life coaching guy. He's here to tell us today. He said, following up on what Ben was just going over, talking about the economy, Chris is going to tell us how to grow our own economy. So, Chris, take it away, my friend. The flow is yours.
I think the first thing I would say is no one's coming for you. Imagine you wake up on a deserted island, and you're realizing after, I don't know, 40, 50 days, whatever amount of time it would take you to comprehend, they aren't coming for you. It's up to you. Like, you've got to build your own life raft. You have to, and all you've got are the tools around you, where you are with what you've got. But then you'll suddenly realize, you know what? I've got everything I need at my fingertips to control and grow and have absolute control over my own economy. Now, things are going to happen. I did a proclamation on my show last week that after the election, and this is, of course, prior to the assassination attempt, but I said, look, after the election, we all know which election I'm talking about, some things are going to happen, and I'm going to predict what they are. The economy is going to remain in flux. Interest rates are going to rise, then fall, then rise, then fall, etc. And the national debt is going to continue to soar. Politicians are going to continue to promise, overpromise, underdeliver, lie, take, cheat, tax, steal, all of it. The only thing within your control is your own backyard, what you can do where you are with what you've got. And if you've got multiple streams of income, you've just become inflation proof. You will be affected by what happens to the economy, but it's not going to determine what you do in your life, and what's going to ultimately result in your economy is completely within your control. Mayor Machicki said recently of the Kenai Peninsula that at a large housing symposium he was speaking to, and he mentioned something about the large and vast percentage of properties that are owned on the Kenai Peninsula by people living outside ownership. Well, shame on us. That's on you and me. We need to own and control more of our own backyard. We need to be investing, reinvesting, redoubling our own efforts right here where we are. And that's the way you are going to control your economy, irrespective of who gets elected and or what decisions are made in the halls of power in Juneau or Washington, D.C. That's the economy. I interviewed a lot of people during the early days of COVID, and one of my favorites was a naturopathic doctor. And whenever I'd ask him or kind of corner him into a public health question or commentary, he'd say, no, I focus on individual health. I don't focus on public health. That's somebody else's bailiwick. I focus on your individual health. And that's what you and I need to do relative to the economy. What's your economy?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? What's your next investment? What's your next move?
When I was younger, one of the early aha moments for me as an adult in my early 20s, right after Terry and I got married, was somebody said to me something about, you said multiple income streams, but and that's not the phraseology that they use, but they basically explained to me that if I did have income coming from all these various sources, that it would help stabilize, regardless of what was going on locally, regardless of what was going on in one of my revenue streams, that it would give me more stability. And that's when I first started that's when I started my first side hustle and started doing some of those things, because I understood that made sense to me. If I have income coming in from a variety of sources, they all may be affected by the overall economy, but to a lesser extent than one specific industry could be. And that made sense to me, having those other streams of income coming in. And I mean, it's been 30 years, and since then I'm still doing it. I still got multiple streams of income, because that's the only way we survived for a few years, is because I did have other streams of income when I lost my mainstream. It happens sometimes, but you're right. It is super important. And that's what gives you that stability.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for you. What a great piece of advice you received. In The Backyard Millionaire, the whole story sort of centers around this young guy who's got not two nickels to rub together, and yet through the influence of a mentor and an idea that's planted in his mind, he creates his own fortune right where he is with what he's got. It's available to all of us. And the multiple streams of income, or as you say, a side hustle. If you don't, it's not for me, you can't do it. Well, I just told you, the character in my book started with nothing. And it was roughly based on my own life, started with less than $0, started in debt. And at the same time, you can achieve whatever it is you want, even from that starting point. Another great book to pick up and put into your millionaire library is $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau. And he outlines and describes many, many stories of people who started with $100 or less and created a side hustle, created a multiple or a secondary tertiary stream of income for themselves with almost no money. But you just have to wake up to the idea, A, that it's possible for you. B, are you willing to commit to it and maybe divert some TV time to something else? And C, pay attention to what's happening globally, nationally, statewide, borough-wide, even citywide relative to your government and what they're doing. But most importantly, pay more attention to your own economy than you are the economy. And I'm not saying you don't understand what's going on in the economy, because it will affect yours ultimately. That's sort of like saying, I don't worry about those kids down at that end of the pool. I know they're urinating, but I'm at this end of the pool. No, it will affect you. Eventually, you're going to get a big old gulp of that, and you're not going to want that. So my point isn't, though, that you just spend all your days focusing on those kids down there that have that kind of relaxed look on their face. You're focused on what you're going to do about it, what you're going to do about your economy, increasing your own leverage, understanding that if you and 10 friends, you and 9 friends, so you put together a group of 10, and we're going to pool our resources, create a syndicate, and we're going to invest in our own backyard. Maybe you feel better about that than you do with investing all on your own. There's a group of people waiting for you to help organize them. Used to be very popular. Real estate syndicates were very, very popular. They've become less so. They're going to start coming back. That's my prediction. Mark my words. We locally can compete with the outside investors. We needn't wait for BlackRock, State Street, or Vanguard to come along and buy up blocks of Alaska like they've done all across the country. We're not a renter's economy or renter's nation. We're owners. We know that. We're going to become more and more valuable in our own backyard if we take the next step and become investors together. Earl Nightingale defines success as making progress towards a worthy ideal. Not getting there. You may never, quote, get to whatever end goal it is, but it's working towards it that will create a fulfilling life and really give you the control and realize you have the levers and control of your economy right there in your own 2 hands.
Chris Story is our guest, author of The Backyard Millionaire and Born to Live, as well as some works of fiction as well, the Watchmen series. We're talking about fixing your economy. So how do we get started, Chris? I mean, again, multiple streams of income. I mentioned side hustle. It could be that. It could be, as you talk about in The Backyard Millionaire, it was 4 homes, right? 4 homes, or in this day and age, 3 homes, and you're effectively on paper a millionaire with a passive income that's coming in. I mean, what is this? Is it that? Is it my idea of a side hustle? Is it both? Is it a combination of whatever you feel comfortable with? What do we need?
And real estate, by the way, dovetails perfectly with the words side hustle, because that's really what it is. It is relatively passive income. There's always some work. Yesterday, I was dealing with 3 or 4 different properties yesterday, and it took some time, but it wasn't my whole day. It was just part of the day. So it is relatively passive income. And the new guide, which, by the way, Michael Dukes is doing the narration of soon, The Millionaire Maker, 6 practical steps to your first 4 homes. These 6 steps can be used towards building anything. They can be used towards creating more health, wealth, prosperity, for your relationships, whatever it is. These 6 steps are universal towards achievement. And towards that effort, I would like to offer right now to your listeners, Michael, a free one-on-one consultation with moi. I maybe know something. Maybe together we come up with something completely. I'm not saying I have the answers, but it is my humility that makes me great. I'm willing to spend a half hour with you on the phone. Let's take your economic temperature and let's come up with an action plan for you. So just text the words next step at 299-7653. I'm offering this free consultation to the Dukes listeners right now. Let's get rolling on your next steps. I knew you were going to ask me, well, what do we do? That's what I suggest we do. Let's put our heads together and figure out what your next step is, because sometimes it does take a coach from the side to just provide a little motivation to Tiger Woods to suddenly sink that putt. You have what it takes. You might just need a little help.
That's got some, I'll be honest with you, Chris, that's got some real value for, when you want to talk to somebody who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, so to speak, who's walked the walk, and you get a chance to pick their brain. I've been blessed in my life to be able to talk to radio people, to voice actors, and to be able to pick their brain and get advice and do those kinds of things. That stuff was invaluable. I mean, that was stuff that allowed me to catapult what I was doing to the next level. And so what you're offering has got real value. And I hope somebody takes you. I mean, I'll probably be taking you up on it here sometime soon. But I hope that more people take you up on that, because that is, and that's the thing. The hardest step is the first one, right? That's always the hardest step, is the first one. But beyond that, this is great stuff. 299-7653. Text the word next step to Chris, and he'll set up a consultation with you. That's awesome. That's awesome. I can't even, yeah, that's amazing. Chris, thank you so much, my friend. As always, I appreciate not only your friendship, but your mentorship and your weekly uplift here. You've always got a place here. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate what you do.
All right, folks, we are out of time for today. Tomorrow, we've got Mike Shower is going to be with us in hour 2, and Cliff Grow in hour 1. We'll see you tomorrow. Well, I hope some of you have written that number down and ready to go on that, because that is some good stuff right there. I hope he gets a bunch of text messages. And Brian, yeah, me too. I'm interested. I am interested. A syndicate idea is interesting. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thank you for coming on board. We will see you guys tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you then, my friends. Have a good day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.